Pearson Edexcel A-Level Religious Studies. This video will look at the different expectations across the questions that assess Assessment Objective 2 at A-Level Religious Studies. The slides from this presentation are included in the description below the video. My name is Susan Curry and I'm the Religious Studies Subject Advisor. If you have any questions about anything within this video, please do get in touch with me. Let's start by looking at Assessment Objective 2 and what it is actually assessing. So, Assessment Objective 2, generally known as AO2, assesses the candidate's ability to analyse and evaluate aspects of and approaches to religion and belief, including their significance, influence, and study. So, what does that actually mean? What do we mean by analysis? So students have to first analyse the question by reading it, by unpicking it to understand what is actually being asked, and then deconstructing those relevant issues. They then need to analyse their own knowledge to select the relevant information to include. They need to pick out the relevant aspects of the topic, breaking each down in the context of the statement. They then need to explain the relevant information in relation to the question, constructing logical chains of reasoning, making connections between the points they've made and the question. So what about evaluation? What do we mean by that? Well, evaluation incorporates a number of different skills within it. These skills are assessed to different extents across our different exam questions. Evaluation includes making judgments, using the analysis that's been made to make connections back to the statement and actually answer the question. Appraisal is also part of evaluation. It involves engaging with the arguments presented. This goes beyond just juxtaposing one idea with another, but actually critically engages with the arguments, considering their relevance, how convincing they are, the weaknesses, the strengths, the importance with regard to this particular question. And this then leads on to a conclusion, a final judgment, where the whole answer is pulled together to give that final answer to the question, having weighed up all of the arguments that have been analysed. Now, in practice, we know the quality of evaluation is usually linked closely with analysis, and we'll see these really interconnected throughout the answer. It's really difficult to have strong judgments if the analysis is weak, because there's almost no firm foundation on which that can be based. Similarly, judgments are often intertwined with the analysis. A chain of reasoning often includes an analysis, includes a judgment. So some paragraphs might start with a judgment, followed by the analysis of the arguments. It's almost to support the judgment. Some students analyse the arguments and then lead that to a judgment and therefore a final judgment at the end of each chain of reasoning, whereas some answers have judgments throughout the chains of reasoning, but these skills are very much connected. So we're going to try and look at them separately, but we realise that they will often come together. So at A-Level Religious Studies, we have 3 different question types which assess Assessment Objective 2. Our exam papers all follow the same structure, so students can familiarise themselves with the question types and how to answer each. Question 1 will always be an 8-mark Explore question. Question 2 will always be the 12-mark Assess question. Question 3A will always be the 10-mark Clarify question. Question 3B will always be the 20-mark Analyse question. And question 4 will always be the 30-mark Evaluate question. So Assessment Objective 2 is only assessed in 3 of those questions. The 12-mark Assess question, the 20-mark analyse question, and the 30-mark evaluate question. So we're going to look at the expectations of each of these to see what the key differences are between each. Our 12-mark assess questions require students to discuss different arguments, making judgments. We recommend that students spend about 20 minutes on this question type at A level. Our 20-mark analyse questions require students to deconstruct information, find connections, appraise different arguments before coming to a judgment. And we recommend that students spend around 30 minutes on this question type at A level. Our 30-mark evaluate questions require students to take a more holistic approach to their whole A level across all papers, reviewing what they've learned and synthesising it, appraising a range of perspectives, approaches to the question before coming to a judgment. And we recommend that students spend around 40 minutes on this question type at A level. So as you can see, these questions slowly ramp up in terms of expectation as the marks increase. More evaluation is expected from question to question, and more time is expected to be spent on these. So these three question types all assess Assessment Objective 1 and Assessment Objective 2. But as each question varies in terms of those marks available and the recommended time, we'd expect that greater level of depth from those questions worth more marks. Additionally, the level criteria for each question varies, with additional requirements needed for the questions worth more marks. So we're going to spend some time looking at those key differences now. So what are the main differences, firstly, between the level criteria from the 12-mark assess questions and the 20-mark analyse questions? So much of the criteria is similar, as they both assess analysis and evaluation. So on the screen now is the top level criteria for both question types. And you can see the differences highlighted in yellow. There are two additional requirements in the 20-mark analyse questions. Firstly, there is the expectation that candidates make connections between the full range of elements in the question. And secondly, there's the expectation that judgments are fully supported by the comprehensive appraisal of evidence. So what does that actually mean? So the differences between a 12-mark assess question and a 20-mark analyse question is the ability to connect different elements of the question. The assess questions are usually quite specific, whereas the analyse questions may have different elements within the question, which require students to make connections between those different ideas or elements. A 20-mark analyse question will have a wider focus. The questions will be written to allow for this, which will allow more scope for this within the answer. So this means that students often bring in a range of ideas from across their studies. Additionally, appraisal of the evidence is required in a 20-mark analyse question. So the answer will need a weighing up of the arguments and discussion of the strengths or limitation of the arguments or evidence. They are expected to engage with the arguments rather than simply present them. So let's look at some examples of questions. Both of these questions on screen now were taken from our paper 2, Religion and Ethics paper, although from different years. Both questions focus on the same topic of medical ethics. The 12-mark assess question asked candidates to assess the ethical challenges raised by pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, whereas the 20-mark analyse question asked candidates to analyse the issues raised for medical ethics by the concepts of the sanctity and value of life. So as you can see, the first question has a much narrower focus and it identifies PGD specifically. Candidates therefore don't have much choice of what to discuss, as the question focuses on a very specific area of the specification. The 20-mark analyse question has a much broader focus, as students can refer to several issues related to medical ethics, which allows them to bring in a broader range of arguments and therefore needing them to make connections between the full range of elements of the question. So the broader question means they're having to make connections between the issues within medical ethics, but also the issues of sanctity and value of life. So as they're likely to bring in a range of ideas throughout the answer, there is a greater need to make connections from paragraph to paragraph so that the answer flows rather than having a list of paragraphs all analysing issues in isolation. So, what does this mean for students? Firstly, they have more time to prepare and write their answers in the 20-mark analyse question. As the question is more complex and includes greater breadth, there'll be a greater need to plan out an answer or include thinking time to consider how to connect the issues together. There's a capacity to explore issues further, so this means they can look at a broader range of issues and look at each in greater depth as they have more time to analyse these further. Students have a greater choice of what issues to explore as the question is less narrow, and there is a greater need to analyse their own knowledge and select the relevant bits to examine. There's a greater need for connections throughout the answer, connecting paragraph to paragraph, one idea to the next. The answer should feel like a whole answer, responding to the question rather than a list of isolated ideas all being analysed separately. There's also the expectation that students engage with the arguments, appraising them, commenting on them within their answer. And this goes beyond presenting the ideas, but considers the relative strengths, weaknesses, importance, relevance, convincingness, and authority. So what does this look like in an answer? Well, the content of the answer is more likely to vary from one student to another, as they select different issues, ideas, and arguments to analyse. There's probably going to be more development within paragraphs. Those chains of reasoning will generally be further extended as ideas are examined in more detail. There'll be a greater breadth of ideas explored, as the question will be wider. There may possibly be a plan, although this is not required. And on the screen, I've included an example of a plan that was written by a student within an exam. The essay should flow from paragraph to paragraph. There'll almost be that thread running through the answer which connects it all together with clear links from idea to idea, so it feels like one whole answer. The judgments will do more than connect and analyse to the question. They'll be developed further as they're supported by appraisal. The judgments made are based on the analysis of the arguments, ideas, but also the appraisal of those arguments and ideas, which is not expected in the 12-mark assessed questions. So what might this actually look like? So the section of the example on screen is taken from our 20-mark exemplar pack. So you may want to pause here to give yourself a moment to read through this. Now it shows analysis of different arguments. But as you can see at the end, the judgment is supported by the appraisal of the arguments. The student is critically engaging with Dawkins' argument and commenting on its convincingness. This snippet of an example, again, was taken from our Analyse exemplar pack, but we've transcribed it to make it easier to read. So again, you may wish to pause here to give yourself a moment to read through this. So in this example, you can see that the chain of reasoning is well developed within the analysis. The appraisal is interwoven through the answer as the student comments that something is rightly defined or that Dodd persuasively states. They're using evaluative language. Okay, let's now move on and look at the differences in the level criteria between our 20-mark analyse questions and our 30-mark evaluate questions. Again, much of the criteria is similar, as they both assess analysis and evaluation. On screen now is the top level criteria for both question types. You can see the differences highlighted in yellow. There are two additional requirements within the 30-mark evaluate questions. Firstly, there's the expectation that answers include a convincing conclusion, which fully and logically draws ideas together, and which fully justifies that final judgment. Additionally, to achieve level 5, candidates are expected to make a synoptic link to another area of study within their A-level religious studies course. So the main difference in the criteria between a top level answer for 20-mark analyse and a 30-mark evaluate question lies in that ability to provide a conclusion which logically draws the answer together. So as there are 30 marks available, candidates are expected to spend about 40 minutes on this question. So answers should include a greater breadth of material, and this concept of drawing the answer together is required to maintain focus and show the candidate's understanding of the big picture and how discrete elements of the course tie together. Some of our best answers often have their conclusion woven throughout the answer, focusing back to the key words of the question and then tied together at the end. However, examiners will look for these wherever they appear in the answer. Some students like to present a thesis at the beginning, setting out their conclusion before analysing the different arguments to use as evidence to support that conclusion. Some candidates have their conclusion at the end, and they use it to really tie everything they've said together, commenting on the appraisal, the analysis discussed throughout the answer. Or some students use almost a cumulative conclusion, so after each idea is being analysed, they reconsider their final judgment. So 30-mark analysed questions are often broader to allow for those synoptic links as well, which are required to achieve that top level 5. So this pulling together of the various elements of different arguments is really necessary to form a coherent answer. So again, let's look at some examples of questions. So both of these questions on screen now are taken from our paper 1 philosophy of religion paper, but again from different years. Both questions focus on the same topic of the problem of evil. So the 20-mark analyse question asked candidates to analyse the view that no satisfactory solutions can be found to the problem of evil and suffering, whereas the 30-mark evaluate question asked candidates to evaluate the view that the problem of suffering shows that ideas about the nature and existence of God are inconsistent. So as you can see, the 20-mark analyse question focuses on solutions to the problem of evil, which is broad enough to allow students to appraise several theodicies. They have the choice of different ideas to bring in, considering the problem of evil, different theodicies as a response, and appraising the strengths and weaknesses of those. However, that 30-mark evaluate question is broader still, and it gives students the opportunity to evaluate the problem of evil, appraise the theodicies, but also discuss the implications of suffering for both the nature of God and God's existence altogether. So there are more elements within this question which require the student to make connections between ideas within the question, but also from ideas examined throughout the answer. There is much more that a candidate can discuss as part of that larger evaluate question. So because the question is broader, it really requires that bringing together with a conclusion. And this is the candidate's opportunity to really weigh up arguments, extending that appraisal to make an overall judgment based on all of the analysis and judgments considered throughout the answer. So what does this mean for students? Again, they have more time to prepare and more time to write their answer. As the question is more complex still and includes greater breadth, there may be a greater need to plan out an answer or include that thinking time to consider how to connect all the issues together. There is a further capacity to explore issues. This means they can look at a broader range of issues and look at each in greater depth, as they have more time to examine these further. Students have a greater choice of what issues to explore, and they can approach the question in different ways as the question is less narrow. So this means there's a greater need to analyse what they've learned and select the relevant bits to examine. There is a greater need for connections throughout the answer, connecting one idea to the next. The answer should feel cohesive, responding to the question rather than lots of unconnected chains of reasoning. Again, there is the expectation that students engage with the arguments, appraising them, commenting on them within their answer. And this then leads to the conclusion, tying the whole answer together, weighing up the analysis and judgments given throughout, coming to that final judgment in relation to the question. To access the level 5 criteria, a synoptic link to another paper studied is expected. It's important to note that this must be another area studied within this course. So, for example, a candidate cannot make a synoptic link between a Hinduism paper and a Buddhism paper, as they're not able to study two paper 4 options. Additionally, it must relate to content within that paper. So a candidate cannot make a synoptic link to the New Testament paper by discussing St. Paul, as he is not included within our paper 3 specification content. So what will this look like in an answer? So the content of the answer is more likely to vary from one student to another as they select different issues, ideas, and arguments to evaluate. So as a teacher, I would often notice that there was a greater variety across one class, so from student to student. Even though they'd studied the same content, their essays would be different because they've selected different areas to discuss. There will be more development within paragraphs, so the chains of reasoning will generally be further extended as ideas are examined in further detail. There will be a greater breadth of ideas explored, as the question will be wider. Again, there may possibly be a plan, although this is not required. The essay again will flow from paragraph to paragraph, as there is a greater need to connect ideas together. There will be further development of judgments, again supported by appraisal. At level 5, there would be an explicit reference to an idea from another paper. And I would recommend that students clearly signpost their synoptic link. Some students explicitly state this links to the New Testament paper as. Some students underline their synoptic link. This isn't required, but it is recommended that students clearly reference the topic they are linking to. I would advise against using highlighters on answers, however, as when they're scanned in, they can appear dark and sometimes illegible. There will be a conclusion. As mentioned, this can be mini conclusions throughout, at the beginning or at the end. So what might this look like? So this section of the example on screen shows a synoptic link being made. And this answer got full marks, although this is only a snippet of it. So you may want to pause here to give yourself a moment to read through this. You can see they clearly signposted the synoptic link stating this links to the New Testament studies as. The link does not feel artificial or forced, but it's used to compare the community in the New Testament to the community within Islam. So the synoptic link actually answers the question, and it's not just included tokenistically. This example includes a section of a final conclusion presented at the end of the answer. Again, you may want to pause here to give yourself a moment to read through this. As you can see, the conclusion refers to the arguments discussed in the analysis. It doesn't repeat the arguments. It provides that final weighing up of the arguments, and it provides a final judgment in relation to the question. And this type of conclusion is not required in a 12-mark assess question or in a 20-mark analyse question. So I hope you found this bite-sized video useful. You can access further support with A-level religious studies from a number of places. The Religious Studies subject page is a useful starting place. This is regularly updated with new information and news items, and subject updates are added under the News tab. You can access all of our Religious Studies qualifications on the right-hand side of the main page. You can also link to this using the link on the screen or the QR code. From the main Religious Studies subject page, you can then access the A-level qualification page, and this provides all the information you need for this qualification. You can access a range of teaching and learning materials by clicking on the Course Materials tab on the top bar and then selecting Teaching and Learning option. Any new resources are highlighted with New, as you can see on the screen. I've also included a one-stop shop document so you can access all of the information on our website for A-level religious studies. This includes links to all useful documentation and teaching and learning support, and is regularly updated with new resources. You can access this using the link or the QR code on the screen now. As mentioned, I'm the Religious Studies Subject Advisor, and you can contact the Religious Studies team via email at teachingreligiousstudies@pearson.com, by calling us or by booking a Teams appointment to discuss something with us. I'd also recommend that you sign up to the monthly Religious Studies subject update, where news, resources and events are published.